slammed by giant paws again and again. Aaron Gibbons was locked in a hopeless fight against a starving, nearly 3-meter polar bear. The predator tore the poor man apart with its powerful teeth and claws, all right in front of the terrified children Aaron desperately tried to protect at the cost of his own life. This is just one of 5 real-life shocking outdoor accidents we're covering today. But first, as always, viewer discretion is advised. On July 3, 2018, 31-year-old Aaron Gibbons took his 3 daughters on a family outing to gather bird eggs as part of a long-standing summer tradition shared by nearly all Inuit families. In Nunavut, collecting eggs from nesting birds like geese and eiders is a cultural practice passed down for generations, one that helps feed families after the long Arctic winter, while also teaching children to respect the land and its wildlife. To reach their destination, Aaron and his children traveled by boat from their hometown of Arviat, crossing about 10 kilometers of Hudson Bay to Sentry Island, a remote, uninhabited land regularly used by local Inuit for fishing, hunting, and that same traditional egg gathering. But while the island may have been a favorite place among families, it was also part of a hunting ground for something much more dangerous. During the summer months, Sentry Island was frequently visited by polar bears, forced ashore as sea ice melted and food became scarce, wandering in search of anything edible. However, Aaron, being an experienced hunter, was well aware of the risk. So, like most locals, he typically brought a rifle with him on such outings, and this trip was no exception. Upon arrival, the family began wandering the island's rocky coastline, searching for nests and filling their baskets. But around 7:30 p.m., everything changed. A polar bear suddenly appeared and began charging toward one of Aaron's daughters. With no time to think, Aaron stepped between the bear and his children and shouted for them to run to the boat. Unfortunately, that same boat was also where he had left the rifle, and now he stood unarmed, face to face with a starving predator. The bear attacked immediately, tearing into Aaron's flesh with powerful jaws and raking its claws deep into his arms and chest. With the bear's bite force of nearly 1,200 psi, over 4 times stronger than that of an American pit bull, Aaron never stood a chance. So by the time another adult on the island heard the commotion and shot the bear on the spot, Aaron Gibbons was already gone. The tragedy shocked the entire country, with Canada mourning not just the horrifying loss, but the sheer heroism of a man who gave his life to protect his children. And eventually, Aaron Gibbons was posthumously awarded the Star of Courage, one of Canada's highest civilian honors for bravery. The man in our next case also fought desperately to save his loved one, but this time, the danger was lurking just beneath the surface. On May 6, 2025, 61-year-old Cynthia Diekema and her husband, Dave Diekema, were enjoying a quiet afternoon canoeing down Tiger Creek, a narrow waterway that winds through Polk County, Florida. The couple led an active life filled with travel, and this time it was nothing more than a regular, peaceful ride. Just the two of them, gliding through calm, shallow water barely waist deep. But as their canoe drifted along the creek's edge, it suddenly passed over a massive, nearly 4-meter-long alligator resting motionless just beneath the surface. Then, in an instant, it thrashed violently, flipping the canoe and throwing them both into the water, with Cynthia landing directly on top of the animal. Within seconds, the alligator lunged and bit into her torso, locking its powerful jaws around her body and eventually dragging her under. Then it began spinning Cynthia violently underwater, performing a notorious death roll, a brutal twisting maneuver meant to tear flesh and disable prey. Shocked and horrified, Dave dove in after his wife without hesitation. He plunged into the water at the exact spot where the alligator had taken Cynthia and began punching the animal with his bare fists, trying to force it off her. But just moments later, right in front of Dave, the alligator suddenly pulled her away and disappeared into the creek. Realizing there was nothing more he could do, the man immediately called for emergency help. A full-scale search operation was launched across the area, including helicopters, divers, and wildlife officers. And a few hours later, they finally found Cynthia. But tragically, she was already gone, having suffered massive internal injuries from the bite, followed by drowning. That same day, the alligator responsible for the attack was located and removed by a licensed nuisance trapper. Another one, lurking nearby, was also captured as a safety measure. Still, encounters like this were anything but rare in those waters. Tiger Creek flows directly into Lake Kissimmee, which is, in turn, officially recognized as the most densely alligator-populated lake in Central Florida. According to recent surveys by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, Lake Kissimmee is home to more than 15,400 alligators, with many of them over 3 meters long. And even more disturbing, a nearly identical attack had occurred just 2 months earlier, on March 3, 2025. That day, a group of kayakers was paddling the Tiger Creek Canal when a large alligator suddenly struck. It bit a 64-year-old woman on the arm and dragged her from her kayak. Her 70-year-old husband and another kayaker instantly jumped in to help. One of the men was nearly pulled underwater as well, escaping unharmed only after jamming his fingers into the alligator's eyes and unbuckling his life vest. And luckily, the woman he tried to save also survived, though she suffered severe bite-related injuries. Cynthia's family, however, is still grieving the loss of a devoted wife, mother, and grandmother. Since the accident, her daughters have gone silent on social media. Meanwhile, Dave's last post, made just 4 days after the tragedy, was nothing but a truly heartbreaking tribute. Our hearts are shattered. My beautiful angel has flown home to be with her savior. Please keep our families in your prayers. It's hard to imagine what Dave must have felt in those final moments, watching his wife die right in front of him and being powerless to stop it. But the tragic end in our next case was no less horrifying, only this time it happened nearly in front of the whole world. This shocking footage of 26-year-old Brazilian hiker-influencer Juliana Marins, still alive, injured, and calling for help, quickly spread across news channels and social media platforms around the world. At that moment, she had no idea the rescue operation to reach her would last nearly 4 days. Juliana had been hiking Mount Rinjani, Indonesia's second highest volcano, which rises to 3,726 meters, with a small group of fellow travelers and a local guide, Ali Mustafa. It was a route she dreamed of for years, known for its breathtaking crater rim views and grueling technical terrain. On June 21st, at around 6:30 a.m., the group began their final push toward the summit. But just minutes into the ascent, Juliana asked the guide to stop and take a short rest. Mustafa advised her to pause and wait while the rest of the group continued just a few steps ahead. However, less than 3 minutes later, he turned back to check on her, only to hear her screams for help echoing from far below the ridge. It turned out that Juliana had slipped while navigating a slick, narrow section of the crater trail. The volcanic sand beneath her boots gave way, and in seconds, she plummeted nearly 300 meters down the steep cliffside. Somehow, she survived, landing on a rocky ledge still visible from the trail above. Rescuers were dispatched immediately, including over 50 members from Indonesia's National Search and Rescue Agency, Basarnas. But the terrain was nearly impossible to navigate. The ledge where Juliana landed was steep, exposed, and surrounded by loose rock. And to make matters worse, weather conditions quickly deteriorated, with thick fog and wind forcing multiple rescue teams to retreat. At that point, it was already clear this rescue would take much longer than anyone hoped. However, the worst happened nearly 2 days after the fall. On June 23rd, Juliana suddenly fell again. Before rescuers could reach her, her weakened body lost grip on the unstable ledge, and she tumbled much farther down the volcano's face. This time she fell an additional 300 meters, coming to rest nearly 600 meters below the original trail, and now completely out of sight. Eventually, a thermal drone was able to locate her the very next day, on June 24th. Rescue teams and local guides began a dangerous descent and finally managed to retrieve Juliana. But by then, it was, unfortunately, too late. Juliana had already died from massive internal injuries, later confirmed to have been caused by blunt force trauma during the very first fall. This chilling accident sparked widespread outrage across Brazil and beyond, as the rescue operation had lasted a shocking 3 days and eventually ended in tragedy. Juliana's grieving family became the loudest voice, calling out alleged negligence. They accused both the guide and Indonesian authorities of failing to act in time, stating publicly that Juliana had been left alone not for 3 minutes, but for nearly an entire night. On an Instagram account dedicated to justice for Juliana, her family wrote, "Juliana suffered great negligence on the part of the rescue team. If the team had reached her within the estimated time of 7 hours, Juliana would still be alive. Now we are going to seek justice for her, because that is what she deserves." The family also claims Juliana was left stranded without any food, water, or thermal protection during the days she remained alive on the cliff. And what makes this accident even more horrifying is that Mount Rinjani is considered one of Southeast Asia's most popular trekking destinations, drawing nearly 65,000 hikers every year. Yet, as this tragedy revealed, there had never been reliable emergency infrastructure in place for accidents like that. And while Juliana's family continues to seek justice, the next terrifying story on our list also took place along a scenic hiking trail. Only this time, the danger came from a charging brown bear. On the afternoon of July 9th, 2024, an emergency dispatcher in Romania answered a horrifying 112 call. On the other end of the line was a young woman, screaming, breathless, and desperate.
"The bear is coming closer and closer. It's here! It's here!"
That voice belonged to 19-year-old Maria Diana, who had been hiking with her boyfriend along the Japimish Trail in Romania's Bucege Mountains when a brown bear suddenly appeared on the narrow path ahead of them and began approaching. At that very moment, both Maria and her boyfriend were still on the line with the dispatcher, and with the bear just a few steps away, Maria suddenly panicked and started to run. That decision ultimately sealed her fate. In an instant, the bear lunged, grabbing Maria by the leg and dragging her off the trail into the brush. Her screams, still audible through the emergency call, were suddenly cut off. Moments later, the bear seized Maria's unconscious body and pulled her over the edge of a 120-meter cliff. Her boyfriend, frozen in shock, could only desperately scream for help and watch in horror as Maria fell from a nearly 40-story height. Mountain rescue teams from Salvamont Prahova were dispatched immediately. But what they found upon arrival was no less shocking. The bear was still guarding Maria's lifeless body, aggressively circling the area and preventing medics from getting close. It wasn't until it attempted to charge the rescue team that it was finally shot. Maria was eventually pronounced dead at the scene, having suffered massive injuries from the bear attack and blunt force trauma from the fall. There was nothing anyone could have done by the time they reached her. And, sadly, once the bear had launched, there was nothing Maria could have done either. Brown bears are the largest predators in Romania, weighing between 160 and 385 kilograms. Despite their size, they can run at speeds of up to 60 kilometers an hour, nearly 4 times faster than the average woman. When Maria started to run, it triggered the bear's natural chase instinct, prompting it to pursue her as prey. Wildlife experts explain that in such encounters, running is the worst possible reaction. Instead, they recommend staying calm, avoiding sudden movements, and slowly backing away, which is exactly what saved Maria's boyfriend, who remained still despite the full-blown panic. Following the fatal attack, the Romanian government responded by dramatically increasing the legal culling quota for brown bears, from 220 to nearly 500 for the 2024-2025 season. Officials defended the decision by citing public safety, despite strong protests from animal rights groups. Speaking through tears, Maria's grieving mother, in turn, urged other hikers to be more aware and never to underestimate wildlife, no matter how peaceful the trail may seem. Meanwhile, Maria's boyfriend was also left deeply traumatized. In one interview, he said he wished the bear had taken him instead, rather than watching the brutal, helpless death of the girl he truly loved. But in our final case today, the only witness to what happened wasn't a person at all, but a personal diary found deep in the wilderness. In early February 1982, Alaska state troopers hiked into the Brooks Range and made a grim discovery. Inside a weathered tent, buried under snow, they found the frozen body of a man, along with a rifle, a pile of film rolls, and a 100-page, handwritten diary that would later reveal one of the most haunting survival stories ever documented. The body found belonged to 35-year-old wildlife photographer Carl McCunn. Carl had paid a bush pilot to drop him off near a remote lake by the Colleen River, far from any roads, towns, or marked trails. He planned to spend the next 5 months photographing Alaskan wildlife in total solitude. It wasn't his first expedition like this, and he was well prepared for the trip, bringing along over 600 kilograms of supplies, 500 rolls of film, and enough ammunition for hunting. But the one thing he hadn't properly arranged was how to get back out. Carl had assumed his pilot friend would return for him in August, but as the months passed and no one arrived, he slowly realized the brutal truth that no one was coming. And shortly after came another critical mistake. In late summer, a state trooper flew over his campsite during a routine patrol. Carl, exhausted and anxious, waved both hands in the air, a gesture he believed meant, "I need help." But in aviation signaling, that wave actually means everything is okay. So the plane eventually flew off, along with his last real hope of rescue. His personal diary, recovered long months later, captured the slow and painful decline that followed. At first, Carl remained optimistic, jotting down daily notes about the beauty of the wilderness and his attempts to hunt rabbits. But as food ran out and snow began to fall, the entries turned desperate. He wrote about starvation, frostbite, regret, and ultimately, resignation. On one of the final pages, he scribbled, "Dear God in heaven, please forgive me my weakness and my sins. Please look over my family." In early December 1981, after nearly 9 months alone, Carl used his rifle to make his final, irreversible decision. His last note included instructions for anyone who found him, asking that his camera gear be returned to his father, and that whoever discovered him could keep his rifle and shotgun as a thank you. To this day, Carl McCunn's diary is considered one of the most tragic and detailed wilderness accounts ever recorded. His story is now used in survival courses and outdoor safety guides around the world as a chilling reminder of how even the most experienced adventurer can become stranded with absolutely no way out. Every year, a staggering number of people are involved in outdoor-related accidents, with over 150 of them eventually ending fatally. And if you're thinking, that's barely anything, just keep in mind that this number only covers hiking-related fatalities, and only those taking place in the world's deadliest trails. With more than 260 distinct outdoor activities out there, and new trends emerging every year, the true number of tragedies is nearly impossible to track. However, one thing is certain. As outdoor adventures grow in popularity, so do the risks that come with them. And now, let me ask you, have you ever had a close call outdoors? One that still gives you chills when you even think about it? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more shocking, real-life stories that might just help you avoid becoming part of yet another chilling statistic.